What's going on, gentlemen? Happy to be back with another Soulcon weekly teaching. Super excited. I'm always excited, though. I guess that's kind of my curse. Pretty pumped up about the Bible, about the Word, about what God's trying to communicate to His people. So, I don't know about you guys, but I don't know how your wives' situational awareness or directions are, but my wife is extremely directionally challenged. She wouldn't mind me telling you, she would tell you herself, but she's still operating on like farmer directions. You know what I'm talking about? Back in the day, guys around my age, anywhere between, I don't know, like 30 and 40, you guys used to use farmer directions, right? You talk to somebody, say, well, go down the road about 2-3 miles, look for the big oak tree, hang a right. Another 2.5 miles, on your left-hand side, you'll see a big rock with moss on it. You want to make a left turn there. Not a right turn, a left turn onto that one. So those are farmer directions. I'm originally from Wisconsin, so those were the directions we used to get around. We didn't have Google. We didn't have any of that. And I don't know about you, but I have found myself being so certain at times about where I'm at, and then finding out later on that I'm way off base, that I'm completely lost, and that I really do need to retrace my steps back to where I was before. So that's kind of what we're going to cover today. I guess we're going to be in Matthew chapter 15, verse 11 is where we're going to pick it up. So if you got a Bible, go ahead and grab it. I'm going to start reading right here. This is Jesus. He says, Jesus continues, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them." Isn't that weird? It's always the younger one, right? It's always that one. It's always that one kid that's just like, "Dad, die already because I want my inheritance from you." And I don't know about you guys, but if my kid ever said that to me, I'd be like, "All right, kid, hit the bricks, like you're done." But this father is loving, and he divides, at that time, he divides the property between his eldest son and his youngest son. Pick it up in verse 13. So not long after that, the younger son got together all that he had and set off in a distant country where he had squandered his wealth in wild living. Go ahead and stop right there. So it says here, not long after that. A lot of the Bible translations will say within a few days. Within a few days, this kid got his stuff together and set off for a distant country. So he left his current country to go to another country and squandered his wealth, spent his wealth on wild living. If you look up wild living, it just means that he thoroughly distributed all of the wealth in the manner in which he was living. Verse 14, it says, After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the country, and he began to be in need. Okay, so when they say in need, we're not talking about like, oh, I don't have enough to get gas. We're talking about I can't put clothes on my body, and I can't feed myself. I can't survive. I can't live. I need food. Okay, so I just want to make that clear in there. So verse 15, so he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. Keep in mind, Jesus is talking to a specifically within Luke, he's talking to a group of Jewish people. So he's got a Jewish audience. He's highlighting the fact that this individual left his country and now he's working to feed pigs and unclean animals, something they're supposed to avoid. Verse 16, he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. So he has this moment when he's sitting there, he's seeing what the pigs are eating. He's already around the unclean animals. He's done everything unclean already. Now he's longing for the very food and substance that this unclean animal is eating. Now we all know that pigs are pretty gross creatures. I don't know if you've ever been around a pig pen before, but they give off a very pungent smell. They don't care if they urinate or defecate on their food. They're going to continue to eat it anyway. They slop it in with the mud, and all of this is happening in front of him, and he's looking at it thinking, I wish I could fill my stomach with that. And that's when it happens. That's when he has that moment. Verse 17. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have food to spare, and here I am starving to death. So he has this moment. He starts thinking back again on the days of being at home. This isn't even the landowners, this is even dad and the sons. He's talking about the hired servants, how they not only have enough food daily, but they have extra to spare. So there's more than enough there. There's more than enough that's being handed out. And he says, I'm starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men. So he got up and went to his father, right? So we've all been there before. We've screwed up. We're getting ready to drive home. It's a long drive home. We're in our head. We're rehashing the story we're going to tell our wife, that we're going to tell our parents, that we're going to tell whoever's at home waiting for us, the person that we've offended. Like, okay, well, this is my plan. I'm going to apologize for this, and then I'm going to offer something. And he's going through this plan in his head. He's rehearsing it in his head. Remember, this was a long trip. He left his country to go to another country to squander the wealth and spend the wealth in wild living. So this is a long trip. He gets himself together, comes up with this plan in his mind, and begins to head back to his dad. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son and threw his arms around him and kissed him. Okay, so dad sees him, says, hey, oh my gosh, here he comes. He runs out there. He throws his arms around him, starts kissing his son. The son speaks up in verse 21 and says, the son says to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, and I have sinned against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. I love that part. The kid launches into his plan of attack. He's like, all right, I need to apologize. Dad, I've sinned against heaven and I've sinned against you. Like, I know how big my sins are. I understand how bad this is. And he's getting ready to start speaking into the second half. Like, this is what I'm going to do to make it right. This is what I need from you. And the father cuts him off, and he yells to the servants and tells the servants, quick, bring some clothes for my kid. Let's get a celebration started. He's lost, but now he's present. Now he's here, and it's time to celebrate. Take him into the house, and the celebration begins. Verse 25 says, meanwhile, the older son was in the field working like the younger son should have been doing. And when he came near the house, he heard the music and the dancing. So obviously they've got everybody organized. They went out and got people, had them come in. They got everything set up. Food's cooking. The celebration, you smell it. You hear the sound of celebration out in the distance. You hear all this stuff going on. And the older son comes in and he starts to ask questions. He calls to one of the servants in verse 26 and asks him, what's going on? The servant says, your brother has come home and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. Okay, so I want to point out a grammatical thing here real quick too. The word the fattened calf, there's a definitive article there, which means this calf was set apart for a specific importance, a specific reason. So they took this sanctified animal and they sacrificed it because this son has returned home with nothing left of his inheritance and pleading to be a hired man within the house. Verse 28, the older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered the father, look, all these years I have been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you killed the fattened calf for him. Wow, listen to the words, right? This son of yours, it kind of reminds me of Adam in the garden when he gets caught and he's busted because he didn't do his job and him and Eve ate from the tree. And God says, what have you done? He said, the woman you gave me was deceived by the serpent and made me eat. Okay, so there's this accusation in the older son's voice, like, your son, this is your son. You know, when your kids screw up, you always tell your wife, well, your son did this today, right? I do the same thing. So that accusation was placed on the father, is put on him. In verse 31, it says, my son, the father says, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He is lost and is found. Wow. That's powerful, right? So he takes the son outside, he meets with him out there and says, look, this is your brother too. And your brother was lost, and he was dead, and he's come home now, and he's had new life breathed into him. He's now found. He's home, and we have to celebrate this. Now, it doesn't say whether or not the older son got on board with the father's rebuke or not, but this story is really an indication of us. We're one of these two people on that maturity line. We're either that individual that's running away from God to squander whatever freedom God has given us in sinful living, in pornography, in drinking, in extramarital affairs, whatever it is. That's us. We're running from God. We're running out of the grace of God, right? And we're going to a distant land away from everything else to try to do what it is we think we're allowed to do or what we should do or what feels good. If it feels good, do it, right? Or we're the older son who's been faithful, who's been serving in ministry, and they see this wretched younger son come home with all of this sin and shame and a wake and trail of debris in his life, and he's welcomed into the church and welcomed into God, and it's hard for us not to get bitter. It's hard for us not to say, well, whatever, I'm going to go sin anyway, since God is just going to do the same thing to him as he would for me. We're one of two people on that spectrum. We're either the kid running away and coming home, or we're the kid that's in the field and we're angry. Now, hopefully, as Christians, we've matured some, and we can look at that situation and celebrate, saying somebody has been redeemed, somebody has come home, somebody's sins are forgiven, and regardless of what they have in their wake, we can love them and we can celebrate with them where they're at in hopes that we can bring them up into maturity in Christ to be the same way. But no doubt you've read this story before, and you've missed probably the most powerful point of this. You've read it 100 times, and you've glazed right over this phrase. I guarantee it. And I want to share it with you. I'm going to highlight this phrase real quick with you because it's extremely powerful, and I'm hoping that God is going to shock you the same way that he shook me with it. And it's going to be in verse 20. Okay, so start in verse 20 there. We'll read the first section of it. It is, so he got up and went to his father, period, right? Next statement. But while he was still a long way off, stop. It's right there. But while he was still a long way off. So this kid is way the heck out there, and he's making his approach to the kingdom. He's making his approach to the Father. His father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. His father was looking for him. He wasn't going about his business and ignoring the fact that he had lost a son. No, he's not. He was looking for his son. He was watchful. He was waiting. Look, if you are that Christian that's living in sin, like me, I'm in sin all the time. I'm always doing things I shouldn't be doing, okay? I want you to be reminded that God has not forgotten about you. He's not ignoring you. In fact, he's waiting at the kingdom gates for you, for that brother at work that you've been praying for the one that's not living the way they should be. He's waiting for them to turn and start making their way back. God doesn't wait until you get to the gates. He doesn't wait till you get to the front of the building and then let you in and embrace you. No, he rushes out to you, throws his arms around you, and begins to kiss you. He calls to his servants who have been faithful to bring clothing and clothe you, to put a ring of royalty, a significance upon your finger, to put shoes on your feet. God is looking even while you're still a long way off. I don't want you to go through one more day as a Christian who's in sin thinking, what am I doing? I can never return home. Because Jesus was telling this parable right here to the Jewish people, saying the kingdom of heaven is like this. A man who had 2 sons, and one ran away and came back, and I was waiting for him, and I saw him coming, and I restored him back to the man he was before, regardless of what anyone else thought. I restored him because I am the Lord, and I choose to do what I choose to do. And if that's you, if you're living like that, if there's something going on in your life like that, come back. The Lord is looking for you. He's waiting for you. He's seeking you, and he's got a fattened calf. He has the fattened calf set aside, that sacrifice waiting to celebrate with you in your new birth, maybe your rebirth of your faith, and entrance back into the family. Don't let the evil one tell you that you cannot be home. Don't let the wicked one tell you that you cannot return back to the Father. The Father said you could, and the Father is waiting. So for the glory of the world and the hope of the nations, stay the course. Come home.